Hey guys, Anthony here. Just want to apologize real quick. I know I missed Friday's episode. We have it ready to go, and unfortunately, I left town to go to Origins and just could not quite get my stuff together to get it online in time. So what we're going to do is this week we have two episodes. We have a preview episode today that Jason recorded while I was away, and then Friday we'll be back to our regularly scheduled programming. So hope you enjoy this episode and Friday's episode. Stay tuned. We'll be back to normal here this week, and we appreciate you guys listening. All right, let's dive in.
Every Night is Game Night Preview Series Episode 6. 2 Kickstarters, Street Masters, and Epic AF with designer Brady Sadler. Yo, my peoples, what's up? This is Jason back again with a preview series episode, and this is probably our most unique one that we've done of these. This is number 6. I reached out to Mr. Sadler over here because he has an active Kickstarter going on, but he is currently engaged in a very interesting pursuit. You want to talk a little bit about it?
Yeah, it's a last-minute promotional trip to Origins to talk about these 2 Kickstarters we're doing. So it's very last-minute planned, but it's good to have some have some discussions going on during this long drive.
Yeah. So it is Wednesday as we record, and could you? I don't know if that's kind of a private story, or if you want to tell the people how this kind of came about. You were gonna go, but then this last-minute thing showed up.
Oh no, yeah, it's. I mean, I work from home, so my schedule's usually pretty flexible. But like, I wasn't sure if I was going to go or not. I really wanted to go because I've never been to Origins, and people always ask me to go. But I was just like, doing some research, and then all of a sudden, I got a slot open on the BGG live stream for tomorrow night. So it's like, I can't pass that up. I need a reason to go. So I was like trying to find hotels tonight, and I literally just left the house about 15 minutes ago, trying to get my hotel reservation locked down.
Oh my God, find a sitter. But all's well that ends well, right? You'll get there and do the panel, and everything will be good.
Yeah, definitely.
Cool. So the people know you for Warhammer Quest, the adventure card game. We did an episode a couple episodes ago. We did our top 10 episodes, and Anthony from Antlab Games, he was a participant in our podcast, and he said that game was his number one favorite solo game. So you're definitely in the right spot.
Awesome. Yeah, that's good to hear.
Yeah, definitely. So before we get to the Kickstarters, and I definitely want to give you some time to pump up the Kickstarters. This is our preview series episodes after all. But we have a lot of fans of Warhammer Quest, the adventure card game. And I was a little bit curious when the Fantasy Flight Games Workshop license kind of did the whole thing that it did. Like, as a content creator within that space, like, how do you, like, what happened? Like, what, like, when you were looking at Adam going, what's going on now? Or talk me through that.
Yeah, so it's interesting because, sorry, it's getting kind of rainy right now. I'm not sure if that's affecting the audio, but it's pretty loud in my car.
It's not one of our regular episodes. I'm sure the people are just riding along with us.
So I'll try to talk over it. But yeah, so it's interesting because when Adam and I were working full-time at Fantasy Flight, we had several ideas for a Warhammer Quest card game because the Death Angel, the Space Hulk Death Angel game did really well. So we were like, why don't we do this for Warhammer Quest? Because those old hobby games that GW did have a great following. But for some reason, it always fell on deaf ears. Nobody really thought to do much with it. So we had a couple ideas we just left with when we left FFG. They remembered that. So for some reason, I think it might have been when the app got more popular or something. They had a Warhammer Quest app. The IP got a little more attention. So the CEO, reached out to us to do the Warhammer Quest card game. So, I mean, that all went well. We just didn't know that there was any possibility of that partnership fizzling out, which is, a shame as when you're on contract and you have a set, time frame of like 5-year royalties, and the first year into those royalties, you get told that the game is done.
Oops.
Yeah, so we were pretty bummed out from that end. I mean, not only did the royalties are one thing, but also just people seemed to like the game, and we wanted to make more content for it. Mm-hmm. So it was kind of a bummer to hear, but luckily, it gave us the rights to the game back. So now at least we have it.
So the rights to not to the IP, but to the mechanisms.
Right. Yeah. Like you can't really copyright the game, but because we are credited as the designers, we have the system now, so we can do whatever we want with it.
Oh, okay, cool. So you didn't have to like wrangle with them or anything like that.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Because I remember I got Warhammer Quest. I enjoyed it, and I was looking up on cool stuff, and I saw like there were 2 character packs that were announced, and I went to the boards and people were like, "That's it? What's going on here?" And people were like, they probably have more, but something's up, and then the announcement came up. So like, was it basically a case of like, this is what we had done, let's get it out there? Too bad we can't get more done or something like that?
Yeah, well, what I suspect happened, because Adam and I were pretty, we were like rabid dogs about the game when it was, getting ready to launch. And we had all these concepts for how to do additional campaigns and new box sets and stuff. But we kept kind of getting the cold shoulder on it. And we assumed it was because there was so much attention put on Star Wars games coming out. The whole Asmodee acquisition. There was a lot going on at FFG, so we didn't really overstep there. We just kind of waited for them to come to us. And then when we saw that all they were pushing really was those character PODs, we were kind of like wondering too. I wonder if they're being cautious about this for some reason, because the game's doing well. It seems to be selling out everywhere, so I'm not really sure what the holdup is. But not really working there and not being on the business end, it was hard to know the details of the partnership and how they weren't really sure. Mm-hmm. So my speculation was they weren't really sure if it was going to continue, so they just didn't want to make any big plans ahead of time.
Right. Okay. So you guys on your design side probably had a ton of stuff. Right.
Yeah. We had a stuff that was more than it could fit in the core set, so we had to hold a lot of stuff back. So yeah, we had a pile of stuff we were ready to do with the game. We just unfortunately couldn't move forward with it.
Mm-hmm. So
plus we had other contracts that started building up.
Yeah, I mean, you guys are busy. Speaking of busy, you guys have 2 Kickstarters that are live right now. So we'll kind of transition to talk about those Kickstarters, and we are going to get back to talking about what you're doing with Warhammer Quest in a second. I want to get to Street Masters first, because that's the Kickstarter that I think, as we're recording this, 9 or 10 days left?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's about to wrap up. By the time this posts, you'll have about a week to get that in there. So let's talk about Street Masters first, and then we'll get to the second card game that's based off of Warhammer Quest. Street Masters. So, but the interesting thing about Street Masters, there's a couple interesting things, but even before we get to what the game is, I'm looking at it, and it's like a minis game. It's another giant minis game among like this giant forest of minis games that are on Kickstarter right now. I mean, I just feel like it's just been boom, 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 boom. I know, Kickstarter is the land of minis, but I feel like this year it's just been more than ever. Like, as a designer, is it becoming easier and easier to pitch these type of games to publishers? I'm not sure what's going on.
Well, yeah, I think it's like a double-edged sword what I've seen on Kickstarter, because a lot of times, Adam and I don't really have aspirations to do Kickstarters. We just end up doing them because a lot of publishers will come to us. They have a big thematic game, and usually big thematic games are kind of prime targets for Kickstarter campaigns. And I think historically we've seen a lot of really successful like miniatures oriented games. So I think it's kind of just been the model that's been, people have been trying to recreate the success of what's been done before. Mm-hmm. And, for the Street Masters project, I understood the approach for that, because it wouldn't have been my concept to, hey, let's do a big miniatures heavy game when it comes to a beat 'em up. I would have abstracted just a card game or something. Mm-hmm. But when the idea was pitched to me, I couldn't really pass it up because I had a really strong concept right away. So for us, we just kind of fell into that model. It wasn't really planned, but the publisher kind of planned it for us.
Oh, okay. So it was like, so you said that what the game wasn't in your head isn't what's coming out. It's kind of like this publisher kind of, let's do a big minis game because that's what's hot right now. So it really is a lot of it's coming from the publisher, this big push for minis.
Yeah, I think it's just one of those things that they look at the market, they look at the trends, they look at the successful Kickstarters in the past, and for this for Blacklist Games, the publisher of Street Masters, they just happen to have a lot of really strong connections with art studios and sculpting studios. So it's kind of like their comfort zone, and they really want to get, they want to have their flagship title, which would be Street Masters, hit pretty hard. So they're just using what they have very accessible to them to hopefully make a successful IP,
So let's talk about Street Masters. This is a fighting game. It's a brawling game. You could probably tell the people about what it is way more than I could.
Yeah, so I always start off with what was pitched to us when we were approached for the game, because the publisher came to us through mutual contacts with the industry. We were kind of recommended to them, and they wanted to make a fighting game that was almost a mix of Street Fighter meets Dynasty Warriors. Mm-hmm. So you have the fighting theme, but it was more cooperative, where you're fighting hordes of guys. So you can have tons of plastic on the board and lots of cool models to fight. So I threw in, when that was pitched to us, I kind of squeezed in Double Dragon on the Vision dock next to Street Fighter, because the beat 'em up side, I love the old beat 'em up games, and it kind of falls in there too. So it kind of became the Street Fighter / Double Dragon meets Dynasty Warriors board game.
Cool.
So that was the original vision, and so moving from there, when we first started cracking at the game, our first couple takes were very, very different. We were trying to be a little more innovative, I think, with our design approach. Wanted to make some design decisions that we hadn't seen before, and we made a couple cool versions of the game. The problem was I wasn't having as much fun as I thought the theme should convey. The theme is just kind of just pure fun. It's like, nostalgic 1990s arcade button smashing. So I wanted to make sure we captured that action, that focus on the fun. So we ended up scrapping our first 2 takes of the game, which were pretty solid games. They just didn't really do it for me when it came to this theme we were trying to capture. So we did a more modular sandbox approach. So the game is I like to say that anybody who's played Sentinels of the Multiverse would kind of get the inspiration behind the fixed deck modularity that we brought to the game. So every fighter has their own unique deck, and you pit them against an enemy faction that has their own unique deck with the boss, and then you fight in a stage that has its own deck and its own way to function. So you just mix and match these elements and make your fighting dream come true.
So I'm a child of Double Dragon, Streets of Rage, all that kind of stuff. So is it because in those games you used to have to, it's a side-scrolling game, you have to go through the whole board, and you go through the waves and waves of minions, and then the boss would kind of appear at the end of level 2, 4, or whatever it is. So you have to go through these sub things. You wouldn't even see the boss. Are you seeing the boss immediately in this game?
Right. No? Yeah. And that was a very conscious design choice early on, because we the iterations we had before, we had the whole, okay, let's go through this many screens before you encounter a boss, and that's fine. I mean, it works for the video game, but when you translate certain things to the tabletop, you have to make certain concessions where I think there are certain aspects. There's just things that are done in video games that aren't as fun to simulate on a tabletop. Mm-hmm. And for me, the fun was just these different mashups, these different matches between this very iconic boss character that has his own little minions versus your iconic fighters who are just pit off, just surrounded by all these guys. You have to fight your way through to get to the boss. Meanwhile, the boss is moving around doing objectives and stuff. Mm-hmm. And that was the linchpin, really, is having the stages feel like a character in themselves, where the stage decks have a lot of personality. They have a lot of cool effects going on with the decks and the map tile. So that was one of my favorite parts of the design process, was making these very personalized stages that almost felt like they were enemies in of themselves, but also giving the spotlight to the fighters and showcasing how really difficult and crazy the bosses could get.
So speaking of the Sentinels of the Multiverse comparison, is it the hero decks and the villain decks and the quote unquote environment deck, which is the stage deck?
Yeah, so it's a very similar product model, and that's kind of a dangerous comparison, because a lot of people will get misconceptions right away when I say that, because there are people that love Sentinels, people that just don't like the complexity or the time length and the player scaling involved. Mm-hmm. So I usually just say that if you imagine the product model of Sentinels, the fixed deck modularity sandbox aspect, where you do all this mixing and matching, that's really what translates to me for the Sentinels. I mean, I love Sentinels, but I do have a problem getting it to the table because of those problems other people have with it. Mm-hmm. So when I when I had that, Adam and I had these early discussions about how to take that fixed deck modularity approach and kind of make it more of a stronger player scaling, so it plays just as well one player as it does with four player. And when I say like one player, I mean one fighter. You just have a single fighter on the board against a whole horde of enemies. We wanted to make sure that was still viable and still fun. Mm-hmm. So yeah, there's a very strong similarity with the product models, but the gameplay doesn't have a whole lot of similarities, except for you're playing cards, you're drawing cards for the enemy, you're drawing cards for the stage. So that's a natural product of a card game essentially. But we add the tactical element with the miniatures and the map that really adds a lot too. And we throw dice in. Dice are just fun.
Wow, it's like a big souffle.
Yeah. Not just dice either, it's exploding dice. So if you roll that crit, you get to roll another one and another one, another one.
Well, you got to do that in a fighting game. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
That's so cool. So like, but at its heart, like it has a whole bunch of stuff, but at its heart, it sounds like a card game.
Yeah, it comes from this because like I'm a very big co-op card game fan. Like most of the solo games I play are card games, and it's not because of like the ease or the ease of storage with cards or anything. I've just always been attracted to decks. Like I used to love the idea of Magic, but I'm not very competitive. So like when Lord of the Rings, the LCG came out, I was nuts about that. I was playtesting that all the time at FFG when I worked there. And then the new Arkham Horror card game and Sentinels, of course. I just always get attracted to cooperative card games. So you can definitely feel that influence with Street Masters. But my brother Adam, my design partner, he is just all about miniatures gaming. He loves Warhammer and 40K. And he's all about skirmish gaming, and he loves miniatures. So of course, having the miniatures in this game, it kind of is a good compromise for us. It kind of where we can meet eye to eye pretty well in this game because it has both things we love in it. So it's a good salad.
So then, speaking of the solo, you mentioned that you can do this with one character. You don't have to two-hand in order to do the game.
Right, yeah. So that was really important to me too because I do play a lot of cooperative games solo where I control multiple characters. Like for example, that's what Warhammer Quest does, and it's not ideal for me as a designer and a player. I'd much rather find a very sweet way to do player scaling where it feels elegant and it's every player you add doesn't add tons of extra time to the game or a ton of extra rules, but just has an elegant way to make things more challenging and offer more decisions. So that was one of the very early design choices too with Street Masters, to make sure we built the game kind of from a solo play standpoint and then expanded it with adding each player. But then by the time you get to 4 players, it still feels like it was designed to be a multiplayer game, but it scales back just as easily. So that's another thing too that we both were very proud of, because when it comes to playtesting, I'm usually not very excited to playtest my own games. I'm like, it's more like work and just editing yourself. But with Street Masters, I can play everything solo and do all the solo testing myself, and it's the most fun I've ever had playtesting a game that I've done. So it's a kind of a perfect situation for me because I enjoy doing the decks, I enjoy playtesting the game, and it plays just as well solo as it does 4 players. So it's I'm like patting myself on the back right now.
That's awesome.
Game, so.
Cool. So I actually will. There's a lot of like gameplay stuff that I'm sure we're passing over, but I'll move people along to the interview you guys did with Mans vs. Meeple, which was really good, where I think you guys really kind of had the game on the table, demonstrated a lot of the actual card plan stuff. So then, definitely direct people over there. What I wanted to ask you though, so this would be the last thing about Street Masters, is fighting games. Excuse me. Fighting games usually they have a lot of homages, right? So they're like a fighter will be based on some anime character, or it'll be based on some other IP, or maybe it'll even be based on a real life fighter. So like the Balrog that we got in Street Fighter was actually supposed to be M. Bison. Right. It's supposed to be like a bite off of Mike Tyson, but then it's like, this is too obvious a pun. So like the big boss be M. Bison and you'll be Balrog, all that kind of stuff. So there's a whole bunch of like, a lot of little Easter eggs if you kind of pay attention to these fighting games. Is there some of that in this game?
Yeah, there's actually a lot of people were attracted to Street Masters Kickstarter because of that, because they have all these favorite characters they liked. So, for example, in the core set of Street Masters, we have this character Kyoryu, and he's a mix between a few different characters. Like he's definitely, you can see the Ryu from Street Fighter influence, and then there's also, and I'm actually I apologize in advance because Blacklist owns the IP and they've developed all these characters themselves before the game design began. So like I don't even know some of these characters who they're based on, because I was never huge into the fighting games. I was more into the beat 'em ups, And so, like, for example, we do have a expansion planned at the 105,000 add-on tier, which is called the Twin Tiger expansion, and it's Adam and I in the game as Double Dragon, essentially.
Yeah, that's a cool picture you guys have.
Yeah, there are definitely like little homages in there that people can probably find, their favorite characters based on somebody in that game.
Speaking of that, I'm actually happen to be a big fighting fan. I'm pretty excited because today they announced the big fight between Floyd Mayweather and Conor McGregor.
Oh yeah,
looking forward to that. Yeah, that finally happened. Okay, it's unbelievable. It'll be a schmaz, but whatever. It'll be fun. But like, I remember you mentioning that like there was one character that was like the jiu-jitsu character, and other characters kind of emulated different fighting styles. Like, how deep did you get into that kind of? Every character having different fighting styles.
So we have a conscious effort to make every deck like very unique. I have to do a lot of research though, because I don't know a ton of the actual fighting techniques. So like, for example, I did have there's a grappler in the game, this jiu-jitsu, he's like into Brazilian jiu-jitsu, one of the core set fighters, Gabriel. So I really wanted to make sure I captured some of those elements and translated them into the card effects. So like, he's really good at staying engaged with enemies and stealing their defense tokens. And defense tokens is like a currency in the game to block attacks. Mm-hmm. So his whole specialty is getting really close to enemies, taking all their defense tokens and using them against them to do damage. So I tried to make sure it felt like, you're a grappler and you're always a better fighter as long as you're nearby and you can grab a guy by a limb or something.
He knows how to pass guard.
Yeah, so there's a lot of attempts to capture those fighting styles, but I have to do research on most of them because I don't really know them offhand. I just have to make sure I convey them through the mechanics. But yeah, the fighter decks were really fun to make because they're all so unique and they all have their own special little things that make them feel totally different than each other fighter.
Cool. Well, I'm hoping that Ronda Rousey makes her way into the game at some point. Be fun.
I'll note that.
Cool. So so that's Street Masters. Hopefully you guys got enough of a sense of how the game plays, how the game feels. Card game, brawling game, very fun kind of theme and stuff like that. You can make a good decision on whether you want to back the game or not. So let's move on to the other Kickstarter. Actually, before we do, has it been difficult kind of managing two Kickstarters at once? I know that it's out of your hands because it's two completely different publishers. But has that been kind of a difficult thing to kind of juggle?
I think the most difficult thing, besides keeping up with the comments and trying to stay engaged with the community on both BGG and the comments page on Kickstarter, I think the hardest part for me is not just constantly refreshing each Kickstarter to see what the funding levels are at, because I get so nervous and anxious when these Kickstarters are live that I have to make sure I stay on top of what stretch goals might come up, how close are we to funding. So I just need to get away from the computer once in a while and not stare at the at the pledges. But yeah, beyond that, it's nice having the publishers be the ones maintaining the Kickstarter and doing all the graphics and all the updates and stuff, and I just kind of get to do the fun stuff, like talk to people about it.
Okay, so it hasn't been too much of a headache kind of running the two Kickstarters, because you're not running them, you're just kind of it's your product, but it's not your dissemination or kind of thing.
Right, yeah. The hardest part was during I think it was last week or the week before, when Street Masters was on the verge of funding but wasn't quite there, and I was just pulling my hair out because I'm like, this game's gotta fund, man.
But it funded. It's there.
Yeah,
and
it's
got
there
a week
so
to bust down some stretch goals.
Yeah.
Cool. So let's go on to Epic AF, which is a product of, I think it's Awful Fantasy Games.
Yes, Awful Fantasy Games.
Okay, so I'd never heard of this I'd never heard of them as a publisher of games or as a content creator. So tell us the story of this game. How did this come about?
So this has got quite a backstory on it. So the Awful Fantasy content creation came through our old buddies and roommates from back when we were in college and through our 20s. We lived with my brother and I lived with a set of twins, so it was two sets of twins in the same apartment. It was, I'll tell you, fun. We always did like weird projects and stuff, but as Adam and I got more, sucked into gaming and everything, Justin and Mitchell Lucas, who run the Awful Fantasy handle, they really latched on to comedy, and they're just two of the funniest guys I've ever known. We've known each other since high school, and we've just been friends ever since. So we've always, been doing random things together. But once they started doing Awful Fantasy and they got a pretty good following on Twitter, around sometime last year or the year before, I remember me and Adam were sitting at a McAllister's with Justin from Awful Fantasy, and we were just chatting over lunch about how funny it'd be to do a game. And because this was when like Exploding Kittens just made like $9 million or something.
Yeah.
And we're like, comedy could probably sell a game, and we were talking about different possibilities. So we ended up that after that lunch meeting, we started working on a game called Awful Fantasy, the card game, and that kickstarted last year. And the funny story about that is I remember I was getting coffee at Starbucks one morning, and I was thinking about what to do with the game. And for some reason, I got this hook all of a sudden, and I called up Adam. And while I was waiting for my coffee, Adam and I designed the game over the phone. And I got and we tested it, and it worked just fine. So we're like, all right, we're done. so
we didn't play test this at all.
We just started rolling with it, and we tested it with Justin and Mitchell. They liked it, so we commissioned an awesome artist, Connor Nolan, and we just threw the project up on Kickstarter to see how it would do. And we only needed I think it was either 10 or 20,000 to print it, and we made like $80,000. So that was a wild success for us. We're like, yeah, this was great. So that's how Awful Fantasy games start. That game is going to be delivering here actually next month. I think the Kickstarter is finally coming in, and I have a copy with me here to bring to Origins to show off. But once that game hits retail, we should get some more buzz, because right now that's why we're running the Epic AF Kickstarter. And the reason that came about was when Warhammer Quest kind of dissipated, Adam and I were thinking about what best to do with it, because we had a lot of ideas. But and we have a couple different original just general fantasy IPs we're tinkering with for other games, and we're thinking about maybe we'll set it in there, which still isn't out of the question. But we were just kind of weren't really feeling that inspired by the idea, just because probably because we were working so hard on the Warhammer Quest, we've kind of like gotten the gritty fantasy that we're usually drawn to out of our system for that. So when we were talking about ideas, Adam kind of was just, hey, why don't we just put this in Awful Fantasy and do a really fun, throw some comedy at it, but keep the same depth of gameplay and see how it does. And that's how we got this project going, and now it's on Kickstarter funding right now. So that's the long drawn out story about how that came about.
Well, no, that's interesting because, okay, so like Warhammer Quest, like you said, it was like, dark, gritty fantasy. Like, that the goblins popping up were kind of funny because goblins can't help but be funny. But like for the most part, it's, you're fighting these awful, disgusting monsters and all that kind of stuff. I guess for this game, and we can kind of go into what is the community reception for this game is, unless there's more you want to say about the actual gameplay itself.
Well, no, we can do that, because the gameplay itself is it is Warhammer Quest. All it is new content, and it's actually, I'll just say right off the bat, it aside from the graphic design being slightly different, and you'd have to sleeve the cards, the games are totally compatible. It uses the same system, same rules. It's pretty much a new core set of Warhammer Quest, the adventure card game, in a new theme. So that's kind of the sales pitch of it. So we can definitely just get into the fun reception of the game.
Put on your flame retardant vest.
Yeah.
I guess, you could kind of distill the feedback too. Maybe it's a little bit too jarring to make that transition from, dark, gritty fantasy, pretty serious stuff, to this super lighthearted thing, like that is in the same line as an Exploding Kittens weight game. So.
Right.
So, what exactly have you been, maybe elaborate, because I've only seen a little bit. Elaborate on some of the things that you are hearing in the community and how you think you will respond.
I don't want to bring the podcast down too much, but yeah. So ever since we announced this thing, I think we all of us, me, Adam, Justin, Mitchell from Awful Fantasy, we all kind of expected some disconnect because it's kind of ironic because the mission statement we had with the game is we wanted to do a game that was the same humor we had with the Awful Fantasy card game, which people seem to really like and appreciate. And the Awful Fantasy Twitter feed has a lot of followers, so we know that people latch onto it. So what we wanted to do was we wanted to provide this we wanted to fill this void in the market that we felt was there, where a lot of games that are silly and like have a funny theme and try to use comedy, they kind of sacrifice gameplay in a lot of ways. So I don't play a lot of games that have funny themes or funny things going on while having deep, engaging gameplay. So we kind of found that to be interesting. So we wanted to see how it would work. And while we were developing it and playtesting it, it was fun because, I mean, the stories were great. It was all these great jokes, but all while playing a game that we knew and loved. And you had the strategy and the depth and the tactics and everything. So I do get where the criticisms come from, because if I remove myself, I could be a consumer and say, well, if I see a silly theme, I see a silly game that's not going to be very engaging. But I guess I put too much stock in the fact that people knew this system, they knew what the game was, that they would understand that even though this theme might not be the same as the Warhammer Quest, it's still a serious game because the game mechanics are very serious. They're the ones you know and love, but it's just a different theme on top of that. I think it's really hard for people to get past that initial blow of like, whoa, this is goofy and the game must be goofy. It's a different game. So that it's kind of, I understand where it comes from, but it also kind of, it's a little frustrating because I just feel like there's people can like what they like. So that's not an issue to me, really. It's more just this like anger that seems to be, it's like, well, if you don't like it, that's fine. You don't have to back it, but it's just lots of people voicing their opinions about how much they just really hate this theme. And it's fine. It's kind of funny for us because we'll just use it as our marketing tools. We just use the funny, horrible quotes as kind of badges of honor because it's most
This person on BGG said this, and if they're that fired up about it, then how bad could the game possibly be? I guess another part of it, just reading through some of it's the internet, so the internet's gonna go crazy. But I really think what I see is, besides like the trolls, is there was a real desire to see more Warhammer Quest. Right? That people were really interested in that world, that theme, and they're used to, like you mentioned, Lord of the Rings LCG, you mentioned Arkham Horror LCG, Sentinels of the Multiverse, and all these kind of big card games have a huge amount of content. Like, it's just boatloads and boatloads of contents. And then Sentinels of the Multiverse, take an example, ended. Or is ending with the Oblivion expansion. And then Lord of the Rings announced their last kind of big content cycle. So it's almost like, you can announce that ending, you give players time to digest, and then they can move on to like the same thing in a different system. So like Sentinels kind of came out with the same game with a different IP. It's almost like people were like, they really wanted more Warhammer Quest. They didn't want just the mechanism. They wanted more of that deal. And even if it was like, like a space theme or like something like an epic Odyssey feel, right? Anthony from MantLab Games pointed out that Warhammer Quest gave you an epic Odyssey feel without like beating the heck out of you, which Lord of the Rings unfortunately does sometimes. That's a very difficult game, especially if you don't deck build the right way. So knowing that game had that in it, that like epic feel, and now we get this game where, how could you possibly get an epic feel from, to some crazy purple-haired whatever with a giant gun or whatever it is? So, I mean, does that make sense? Like,
No, yeah. And that's part of why I don't really respond too much, because I get it. Like, I get people, we kind of expected to hear some of that. I'll honestly admit that I didn't expect this much, because a lot of it's kind of 50-50, because we see a lot of great feedback. People love the art. They love the Connor Nolan's art style. It's very comic booky, and like, I think it's probably just one of those results where when you're involved in something, like from the creation side, you get to have a lot of fun with stuff, and you don't really worry about taking it too seriously, because, I mean, I've been working in games so long and working in themes that are just so I mean, I never want to, say anything bad about certain themes, especially the ones that people love and care about. Right. But I've been involved in like Warhammer. I've been involved in Lord of the Rings. I've been involved in all these like big epic themes. And as a fantasy writer myself, I mean, I published a fantasy epic, so I definitely have that. I still love that epic fantasy stuff, but part of me also just wants to really just let go sometimes and just kind of make fun of myself and not take myself too seriously. And when we were developing the both the Awful Fantasy card game and Epic AF, it's just so much fun building a ridiculous IP. And to me, it still feels epic. I still get a sense of epicness because when I'm fighting the Dark Lord on a toilet and he's throwing like flaming toilet paper at me and stuff, and he's got toilet paper made of flesh, I'm like, this is so brutal. Like, I don't know, it's just a sense of like it's a disconnect. I guess I don't feel myself anymore, but I definitely see where fans come from. So I'm not gonna like tell them they're wrong, because of course it's their opinion, and I would never want to tell them, hey, you're thinking something incorrectly, because these people play my games, they love a lot of the games I do, so I'm never going to tell them they have the wrong opinion. But it's just going to be one of those things where it won't appeal to everybody, and we understand that. We just hope it does well enough and it reaches the right crowd where it does find a niche. And like we always say, Adam and I keep saying, we're going to do more with this game. Like this system isn't going to be just Epic AF. I mean, we have this game that we love and we care deeply about, and it's done well, that we want to do more with it. This is just kind of one of the first ones out of the gate because it was so much fun to work on.
So I guess that idea that like, you could have made a zombie game in this thing, you could have made a space thing, those like tried and true kind of genres, and then ease your way into the more kind of creative genres. I mean, I guess that's a way to do it, but it's something that just didn't feel right.
Yeah, and it might also just be a result of like, I mean, first off, when our best friends are running a Twitter feed that's hilarious, and they have this artist who can do whatever they want with all of their crazy tweets, it's really hard to pass up if we're doing something with them.
Got it.
And at the same time, I mean, when this came up, Adam and I were working on The Walking Dead No Sanctuary, which is our big epic zombie game, and working on the preliminary stuff for Street Masters, which is a big thematic fighting game. And so like we have, I mean, and Street Masters isn't like super serious. It's kind of a ridiculous theme as well. But like I say, it's one of those. I guess it's one of those things where I have passion for both. I have a deep passion for lots of really serious IPs, and I do take fantasy pretty seriously. But at the same time, like I I find the Awful Fantasy stuff to be just fantastic myself. And it might just gonna end up a personal preference thing in the end, like most things. But yeah, I mean, you make the great points, and you're definitely hitting the nail on the head with how these people are reacting to it. And it's not a huge surprise. Like I said, it's a little bit of a surprise because I didn't expect to be that much on that end. Like I thought maybe we'd outweigh it more with the success we had with the Awful Fantasy card game. But I think it's a dichotomy, because there's not a ton of games like that. It's like very serious gameplay, but with not the serious dark theme where it's just constantly, just depressing. And I mean, not that Warhammer's like super depressing, but it's just, it's always
be a grind. Especially you play like because I remember in Warhammer Quest you could play the individual scenarios, but you could play like a long delve, and then the long delve was like, oh, I got this boss, and this thing is in the I forget exactly what that place is called, where the boss is always sitting there throwing stuff at you.
Yeah.
And it's just like it's just it's not as punishing as Lord of the Rings, but it's you feeling, you're not exactly feeling haha funny burning toilet paper type stuff.
Right.
Okay, I mean, at the end of the day, like, you did what you did, and you have the it came out of your connections, and you a desire to laugh, and maybe it might just take a little bit of time, and it might just take enough kind of people playing it, and reviewers, and like tastemakers or whatever you want to call it, to kind of give their stamp and say, like, what, this is fun. They made the right decision. Maybe it's just something like that needs to happen. I'm not sure.
Right, yeah, and I always look at the bigger picture, where like if we do, I mean, like I always tell people, Adam's got a huge attraction to doing a sci-fi game at some point, because I don't think we've really done a lot of sci-fi stuff. I've done some work on the Death Angel game, but haven't really done a core design, and he's a big space fan, so it's not out of the question that we might do like a sci-fi oriented type game in that adventure card system and even expand it more. So like at the end of the day, it might just be a chapter in this game system's life where it might not be for everybody, but whoever does like it, they'll have an awesome game on their shelf. So we're happy with that.
Yeah, and you have the advantage, like especially with that thing, it's not a huge minis game, like where you need like hundreds of thousands of dollars just to kind of break even. It's a card game, and it's very lightweight. You can put it out there, and there's still the Adam and Brady Sadler kind of stamp where it's like you guys have made some really great games, and whether this funds, this doesn't fund, you still kind of have your kind of quote unquote good name, I suppose. And you'll be back, and it'll be retooled, and maybe the community will be more used to it. Like even as the bumpiness and the funding goals aren't exactly where you want them to be, I imagine it's okay, right?
Yeah, and I mean we had a pretty we had a slow start with the first one we did with the Ultimate Fantasy, the card game, and we didn't expect it to get that high up, and I understand that might be a result of the formula, because it was a silly game and it was super easy to explain. It wasn't a deep, engaging game, so it might be easier to find that audience who doesn't want to get the big epic experience. They just want to sit down, have some laughs, have some funny cards, kind of like the whole Exploding Kittens model. Mm-hmm. So, we'll see. I mean, it'd be interesting to watch as it unfolds, because assuming we do fund and hit our goal, it'll be nice to see people, supporting a game that has both the depth and the comedy. Because I'd love to see more games like that, where it's themes that might not be traditionally marketed toward deep, engaging games, but I think there's room for that type of game, and I really hope this one is it. But we'll see.
Yeah, there was the Munchkin CCG that was announced and supposed to come out. I think it was delayed. Eric Lang had designed that, so it's like I feel like you're not alone in that wanting to take on funny IPs and putting some beat behind them.
Right.
So yeah, we'll see. So I know there's 2 Kickstarters. I mean, is there anything else in the pipe that you guys working on, or is this kind of it for now?
Well, we have other things working on. Nothing really that immediate. I'm not sure if it's. I'm not sure. I think it's pretty official, so maybe I can say this. But I'm actually signing up, but just me this time, as a solo design with another designer. So it's not a solo design. I'm co-designing with somebody other than my brother, which is new for me. So I'm going to be joining up with Everything Epic to help out with the Rambo game that's supposed to hit Kickstarter next year. Cool. So that's supposed to launch in January. So they should be probably releasing some more information about that, but I'm going to be reviewing the contract when I get to my hotel at Origins. So, so I'm pretty pumped about that. And then we have our Walking Dead No Sanctuary game supposed to hit this year after Gen Con, so I'm pretty excited about that. But yeah, as far as anything else in the works, we just have a few projects we're working on to hopefully announce before the end of the year. But these are the ones that got off our plate first,
And as you have proven, you will get up 5 minutes before and just leap in the car and go wherever you need to go to promote these things.
Right, exactly.
Well, this has been really, really cool, man. I hope that this was a real fun way to spend a little bit of your trip down to Origins.
Oh, yeah, definitely, man. I appreciate you letting me talk on my car, and it looks like the rain finally stopped, so good timing, I guess, after yelling in my phone over the rain.
Yeah, I really hope for the listeners that you guys understood us and the rain. You didn't hear too much of the rain in the background, and this was a worthwhile conversation. So, yeah, 2 Kickstarters out there right now. As this will post, we'll try to get this posted around Monday or Tuesday of early next week. And by then, Street Masters will still be on Kickstarter. You'll have about a week left on that. And you'll have a little bit more time to look at Epic AF if the disjointed theme or approach theme isn't too much for you. If you like Warhammer Quest, I mean, they're promising that it's basically that. So, let's see if you can overcome some of the theme issues.
If you can swallow the Dark Lord on the toilet.
That's right on the splash page, too. It's like you don't even wait on that. It's just right there.
Yeah, they actually just changed that to feature. They just got new art in for the heroes. I think they moved around some of the art. So now, unfortunately, the Dark Lord's no longer there, but he's probably somewhere on the page, I'm sure.
All right, man. Well, thank you very much, man. Thanks a lot for your time.
Oh, no problem. Thanks for having me, man.
And that'll wrap it up for another episode. Just like with all of these preview series episodes, we really hope that through the episode we give you enough information, so I know there's going to be a little bit of kind of selling. It's not going to be like a hard-boiled review or anything like that when it comes to the preview series, just because we haven't played the games. But at the same time, I think that we really try hard to at least give you a lot of information. Do you have enough information where you can back the game, with a good sense of what you're getting when you get the game? So like Street Masters is kind of a card-driven game, even with all the minis, and Epic AF is what it is. You're either going to back it or you're not going to back it. So, I hope that you found this episode entertaining and informative. Please like us on social media. Please follow us at ENGN_podcast. Please visit our main website page, which is boardgamersanonymous.com. You can subscribe to BGA Podcast or follow them on Twitter as well. We have a presence on BGG. We are on the Solo Games Facebook Guild, and all over the place. If you're in Solo Games, we're going to try really hard to be in the way all over the place. Going to make a request, especially if you like it, if you like the podcast, please rate us on iTunes. It really, really helps us. We've gotten a couple ratings recently, and you see the difference. So if you can go there and just give us 5 stars, or hopefully 5 stars, that would really, really help us out. So that's basically it. Hope you enjoyed the episode. Later, everybody.